Tensions in West Asia have now brought two nuclear global superpowers face to face, one that completely changes the entire equation, militarily or diplomatically. China has openly challenged the U.S. over the Strait of Hormuz blockade. In fact, two Chinese ships have defied the Hormuz blockade, which has triggered a major showdown between the two countries. This comes after China issued a blunt warning against any attempt to impose a naval blockade on Iran. China maintains that the Strait of Hormuz must remain open for global trade and Chinese energy supply lines. Beijing has made it clear that its economic cooperation with Iran will not be subject to outside interference, with Chinese officials stressing that stability of Hormuz is essential for global energy security.
At a time when the relevant parties have already reached a temporary ceasefire arrangement, the U.S. escalation of military deployment and its targeted blockade action will only exacerbate contradictions, heighten tensions, undermine the already fragile ceasefire situation, and further jeopardize the safety of passage through the strait. This is dangerous and irresponsible behavior.
Now, Beijing continues to emphasize that safety, stability, and unimpeded passage from Hormuz are critical to international trade. Hormuz is a vital lifeline for the world's second largest economy, and the numbers explain why 40% of China's crude oil imports, along with 30% of its LNG imports, flow through the strait. But the confrontation between the two countries escalated from words to water. According to shipping tracker websites, two China-linked vessels moved through the strait despite the blockade that was imposed by the United States yesterday. Now, reports suggest that both of these ships have been sanctioned by the United States. Reports also suggest that the U.S. blockade of Hormuz may be aimed at preventing energy transactions in China's yuan, which challenges the petrodollar system and a major way to bypass the American sanctions. The U.S. Central CENTCOM claims more than 10,000 U.S. sailors, Marines, and airmen, along with over a dozen warships and dozens of aircraft, are executing the mission to blockade ships entering and departing Iranian ports. It says that no ships breached the blockade in the first 24 hours, with at least 6 merchant vessels turned back after complying with American directions. Now, the ripple effect is also being felt across the Gulf. Saudi Arabia and other regional powers are reportedly urging Washington to step back from escalation and return to diplomacy. They warn that a prolonged blockade standoff could trigger energy shocks and destabilize the region even further. America and China have not been on the same page over the ongoing conflict. Following the start of the hostilities in February, Beijing, remember, had condemned the Israel-US attack against Iran. Donald Trump has also threatened to slap an additional 50% tariff on Beijing if it supplies weapons to Tehran. Now, according to an intelligence assessment report, Beijing could be preparing shipments of air defense systems to Iran. China has dismissed such reports as groundless and malicious. All of this has been unfolding as Xi Jinping hosts Abu Dhabi Crown Prince Sheikh Khalid bin Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan in Beijing. During the meeting, Xi proposed a 4-point roadmap for peace in West Asia as well, and this is as per the Xinhua news agency. Now, the proposal calls for upholding peaceful existence, respecting national sovereignty, coordinating development and security, and safeguarding the international rule-based order. And that brings us to the bigger question. Beyond the strait itself, what does this mean for the upcoming Trump-Xi meeting? Donald Trump has said that he will visit China on the 14th and 15th of May. This will be a first direct trip by a U.S. president in nearly 10 years. Launching a blockade that directly threatened Chinese energy interests just 30 days before sitting down with Xi Jinping in Beijing might be a negotiating tactic that Trump wants to avoid. Meanwhile, international diplomatic efforts continue to calm things down in West Asia. Just a while back, Donald Trump called Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, where the two leaders discussed bilateral ties and the situation in West Asia. In fact, taking to social media, PM Modi released a statement as well, saying, and I quote, "We reviewed the substantial progress achieved in our bilateral cooperation in various sectors. We are committed to further strengthening our comprehensive global strategic partnership in all areas." We also discussed the situation in West Asia and stressed on the importance of keeping the Strait of Hormuz open and secure. Now remember, this is the third phone call between the two leaders this year and the second since the US and Israel launched their war against Iran. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is facing mounting pressure on multiple fronts. And we're not talking about the war. Rather, Netanyahu finds himself facing criticism from a senior American leader, a setback from a key European ally, and a fresh controversy over his claims on the US-Israel coordination. First, the former U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has once again criticized the Israeli Prime Minister, calling Netanyahu a liability to Israel's long-term security. Speaking in an interview, Hillary Clinton underscored her support for Israel's right to exist and defend itself. But she drew a clear line between backing Israel and backing its current leadership. She reiterated that Netanyahu's approach has weakened Israel's international standing and undermined its broader security interests. Citing her own experience, Hillary Clinton said that Israel has long pushed for confrontation with Iran, claiming that Netanyahu has repeatedly urged American presidents to support an open-ended conflict. At the same time, Netanyahu is facing a diplomatic setback from Europe, as Italy has announced the suspension of the automatic renewal of a defense cooperation agreement with Israel.
There are things we do not agree with. We act accordingly. You didn't ask me this, but the government, for example, taking into account the current situation we are experiencing, has decided to suspend the automatic renewal of the defense agreement with Israel.
The move signals a shift from Italy's traditionally strong support for Israel. This decision follows criticism of Israeli military actions in Lebanon as well, which have affected Italian troops serving under a UN mandate. Italy claimed that IDF fired shots at an Italian convoy in a UN mission in Lebanon. Subsequently, Rome summoned the Israeli ambassador to Italy, demanding an explanation. As per reports, military training cooperation, joint exercises, exchange of military technology between the two countries could now come to a halt. And now Netanyahu's own remarks have sparked a fresh controversy. The Israeli Prime Minister claimed that the Trump administration has been sharing daily updates with Israel on negotiations with Iran.
I spoke with Vice President J.D. Vance. He called me from his plane on his way back from Islamabad. He briefed me in detail, as officials of this administration do on a daily basis, about the developments in the negotiations in this case, the collapse of the talks.
These statements have drawn criticism from American lawmakers and commentators, raising concerns about the nature of the U.S.-Israel engagement. Mark Pocan, a Democratic congressman from Wisconsin, on social media pointed out that the Trump administration reports daily to Netanyahu on the Iran war, but not the U.S. Congress or the American people. So that's three developments, with one central figure, Benjamin Netanyahu, who faces growing pressure on multiple fronts. Amid escalating tensions with China over Taiwan, Japan is now moving toward a historic shift, one that could see Tokyo possess a conventional military for the first time in nearly 80 years, the first since World War II. Japan's ruling Liberal Democratic Party is pushing to amend the country's pacifist constitution, and at the center of this lies Article 9, a clause written in 1947 under the U.S. occupation after World War II. It renounces war and clearly states that Japan will not maintain land, sea, or air forces with war potential in theory. That means Japan does not have an army. Instead, in reality, Japan operates self-defense forces, officially described as a strictly defensive, civilian-controlled organization, not really a traditional military. Despite being one of the most advanced military forces in the world, these self-defense forces have operated under tight constitutional limits since World War II, restricted to defensive operations, disaster response, and limited international peacekeeping. Now, the Japan Prime Minister, Sanai Takaichi, is calling for concrete proposals to revise the constitution, not to scrap Article 9, but to formally recognize and legitimize the self-defense forces. A move that comes in the backdrop of growing regional tensions with China. Amending the Japanese constitution requires a two-thirds majority in both houses of the country's parliament following a national referendum. Even as Japan contemplates changes to its constitution, it is fortifying remote islands for potential war over Taiwan. On the Iwoto Island, which is better known as Iwo Jima, which witnessed one of the World War II's bloodiest battles, Tokyo is considering stationing fighter jets permanently on this island. A move that would allow Japan to respond within minutes to any foreign military activity in the region. Japan also plans to deploy medium-range surface-to-air missile systems on the Yonaguni Island, located only 110 kilometers from Taiwan, by March 2031, a move that is expected to extend Japan's air defense reach by around 50 kilometers. Japan is reportedly planning to deploy advanced anti-ship missiles as well on the Minamitorishia, which is the country's easternmost island. In addition, Japan is also reportedly planning to deploy a launcher, surveillance drones and radar systems on the island as early as June this year.